My name is Richard Morrison, and I'm 65 years old. If you're just starting to watch this story now, I need you to take a deep breath, because what I'm about to share with you is something I never thought could happen in my own home, under my own roof, to the person I'd spent my entire life trying to protect. This is a story about trust, betrayal, and the kind of evil that hides behind a smile at the breakfast table. This is about my mother, the woman who raised me, and the wife I thought I knew after 40 years of marriage. I'm a retired high school teacher from Ottawa. Spent 38 years teaching history to teenagers who mostly didn't want to be there, but I loved every minute of it. My wife Margaret and I raised 2 kids in our little brick house in Nepean. Our daughter Emily lives in Vancouver now, works in tech, visits twice a year if we're lucky. Our son David died 8 years ago. Cancer. He was 34. That loss changed everything for Margaret and me. But we made it through. At least, I thought we did. My mother, Dorothy, is 85. Sharp as a tack most of her life, but about 2 years ago we started noticing things. She'd forget where she put her keys, call me by my father's name. Once, she left the stove on and nearly started a fire in her apartment. The doctor said it was early-stage dementia. Not severe, but it was there, progressing slowly. She could still hold conversations, remember most of her life, recognize all of us, but she needed supervision. She couldn't live alone anymore. Emily couldn't take her. Vancouver's expensive, her condo is tiny, and honestly, she's never been close to my mother. They had some falling out years ago over something I never quite understood. So last October, Margaret and I made the decision together, or so I thought. We'd bring Mom to live with us. We have the space. I'm retired, home all day. Margaret works part-time as a bookkeeper, just 3 days a week. It made sense. I remember the conversation at our kitchen table on a rainy Tuesday morning. Margaret was reading the newspaper, sipping her coffee. I brought it up. I think Mom should move in with us, I said. She can't manage on her own anymore, and I don't want her in some facility where they don't care about her. Margaret looked up from the paper. Her reading glasses were perched on her nose, that expression she gets when she's thinking. Are you sure, Richard? That's a big commitment. Your mother can be difficult. She's my mother, I said. She took care of me my whole childhood. It's my turn now. Margaret folded the newspaper slowly. All right, she said, if that's what you want, but you'll need to be the primary caregiver. I have my work, my book club, my yoga classes. I can't be here all the time. I know, I said. I'll handle it. Thank you for understanding. She smiled. That smile I'd seen 1,000 times over 4 decades. Warm, supportive, the smile of a partner who had your back. Looking back now, I wonder if I ever really saw what was behind that smile. Mom moved in the first week of November, right after Remembrance Day. We set up the spare bedroom for her, the one that used to be David's room. Margaret helped me move furniture, pick out new curtains, make it comfortable. We brought Mom's favorite chair, her photo albums, her television. She seemed happy, confused sometimes, but happy. She'd sit in that chair and watch her game shows, call out answers to Jeopardy, laugh at Wheel of Fortune. Those first few weeks were good. I'd make breakfast for the 3 of us every morning. Oatmeal for Mom, toast for Margaret, eggs for me. We'd eat together, talk about the day ahead. Mom would sometimes tell the same story twice in one meal, but that was okay. I'd listen like it was the first time. After breakfast, Margaret would head to work on her bookkeeping days, and I'd spend time with Mom. We'd do crossword puzzles, watch old movies. Sometimes she'd tell me stories about when I was a kid, things I'd forgotten or never knew. Those were precious moments. But then, around mid-December, things started to change. It was subtle at first. Mom seemed more tired. She'd sleep later in the mornings, sometimes not getting up until 10 or 11. I figured maybe the move had been hard on her. Maybe she needed time to adjust. But then I noticed she wasn't eating as much. She'd push her oatmeal around the bowl, take a few bites, say she wasn't hungry. She started losing weight. Not dramatically, but enough that I could see it in her face, her hands. And she seemed scared. That's the only word for it. She'd flinch sometimes when Margaret came into the room. She'd go quiet, looked down at her hands. If Margaret asked her a question, Mom would answer in this small voice, almost like a child being scolded. It wasn't like her. My mother had always been strong-willed, opinionated, never afraid to speak her mind. This new version of her, this timid, withdrawn woman, it worried me. One evening in late December, I was in the kitchen making dinner. Margaret was at her book club. Mom shuffled in, using her walker, and sat at the table. She watched me chop vegetables for a while, then said quietly, "Richard, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Mom." "What is it?" She hesitated, twisted her hands in her lap. Does she like having me here?" I put down the knife and turned to look at her. "What do you mean? Of course she does. Why would you think otherwise?" "I don't know," Mom said. Her voice was small. "Sometimes I feel like I'm in the way. Like she wishes I wasn't here." "Mom, that's not true," I said, walking over to sit beside her. "Margaret agreed to have you here. She wants you here, your family." But even as I said it, I felt a small knot forming in my stomach. Was Margaret being cold to Mom? I tried to think back over the past few weeks. Margaret had been distant, maybe, not rude exactly, but not warm either. She'd speak to Mom in short sentences, answer questions with yes or no, spend most of her time in our bedroom or out at her activities. I'd chalked it up to adjustment. Having another person in the house after years of it being just the two of us, that takes getting used to, right? "She's just busy, Mom," I said, patting her hand. "She's got a lot going on with work and her groups. It's nothing to do with you." Mom nodded, but she didn't look convinced. "Okay," she said. "If you say so." That conversation stuck with me. I started paying more attention. And the more I watched, the more I saw. Margaret's impatience when Mom moved slowly. The way she'd sigh heavily if Mom asked her to repeat something. The tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. I told myself I was imagining things. That Margaret was just stressed. That I was being oversensitive. Then came the morning I found the bruise. It was early January, a Tuesday morning. I'd gotten up early to shovel the driveway after an overnight snowfall. When I came back inside, cold and sweaty, I went to check on Mom. She was still in bed, which was unusual. She was always an early riser, even with the dementia. I knocked softly on her door. "Mom, you awake?" "Come in, Richard," her voice came, weak and tired. I opened the door. She was sitting up in bed, looking exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes. Her hair, usually neatly combed by this point in the morning, was messy. "Are you feeling okay?" I asked, walking over to sit on the edge of her bed. "Just tired, honey. Didn't sleep well. Do you want me to bring you breakfast in bed? I can make you some oatmeal, bring it up." "That's sweet," she said. "Maybe in a bit." She reached up to push her hair back from her face, and that's when I saw it. A bruise on her forearm, just below the elbow. Dark purple, the size of a thumbprint. Actually, several thumbprints, like someone had grabbed her arm hard. "Mom," I said, gently taking her arm to look closer. "What happened here?" "Did you fall?" She pulled her arm back quickly, tucking it under the blanket. "It's nothing," she said. "I bumped into the doorframe yesterday. You know how clumsy I am." But something about the way she said it, the way she wouldn't meet my eyes, set off alarm bells. "Mom, are you sure? That looks like—" "I'm fine, Richard," she said, more firmly. "Really, don't fuss." I wanted to push, to ask more questions, but she looked so tired, so fragile. I let it go. "Okay," I said. "I'll bring you some breakfast in a few minutes. You rest." I went downstairs, my mind racing. A bruise like that doesn't come from bumping a doorframe. I would know. I saw enough injuries during my years teaching, kids who got hurt playing sports, kids who got hurt other ways. But Mom was 85, with dementia. It was possible she'd fallen and didn't remember correctly. It was possible she'd grabbed herself somehow. I was probably overreacting. Margaret was in the kitchen, dressed for work, pouring coffee into her travel mug. "Morning," she said, not looking at me. "Is your mother up yet?" "Yeah, she's awake. She's tired, though. Says she didn't sleep well." Margaret said, checking her phone. "Well, I'm off. I've got back-to-back appointments all day. There's leftover lasagna in the fridge for dinner." "Margaret, wait," I said. "Did you notice any bruises on Mom?" On her arm? She looked up, her face blank. Bruises? No. Why? She has a bruise on her forearm. Looks like she might have fallen or bumped into something. I just wondered if you'd seen anything. Margaret shrugged. She's old, Richard. Old people bruise easily. She probably doesn't even remember how she got it. She picked up her keys. I really need to go. See you tonight. And she was gone. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at the door she'd just walked through. Something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something wasn't right. I made Mom her oatmeal, brought it up to her room, watched her eat a few bites before she said she was full. She looked so small in that bed, so vulnerable. Over the next few weeks, I became hyper-aware of everything. I watched Mom closely. I watched Margaret closely. And I saw things that made my blood run cold. More bruises appeared. One on Mom's shoulder, one on her hip. Mom always had an explanation. She'd fallen. She'd bumped into something. She was just clumsy. But her explanations were vague, uncertain, like she wasn't sure herself. And her fear of Margaret grew worse. If Margaret was in the house, Mom would stay in her room. If Margaret came into the living room where Mom was watching TV, Mom would tense up, go silent, shrink into herself. One time, I walked into the kitchen and found Margaret standing over Mom, who was sitting at the table. Margaret was speaking in a low voice, too quiet for me to hear, but the expression on her face was hard, cold. When she saw me, her face immediately softened into a smile. "Just reminding your mother to take her medication," she said cheerfully. But Mom's hands were shaking as she picked up her pill bottle. I started losing sleep. Night after night, I'd lie in bed next to Margaret, listening to her breathe, wondering what was happening in my house. Wondering if my wife, the woman I'd spent 40 years with, the woman I'd raised children with, could be hurting my mother. It seemed impossible, insane. Margaret wasn't a violent person. She'd never raised a hand to anyone in all the time I'd known her. But the evidence was there. The bruises, the fear, Mom's deteriorating condition. I thought about confronting Margaret directly, asking her outright if something was going on. But what would I say? Are you abusing my mother? She'd deny it. She'd be offended. She'd make me feel crazy for even suggesting it. And if I was wrong, if I was just paranoid, it would destroy our marriage. 40 years of trust, gone over an accusation I couldn't prove. But if I was right, I needed proof. I needed to see what was happening when I wasn't there, when I was asleep, because I'd started to notice something else. Mom's condition always seemed worse in the mornings. More tired, more bruised, more frightened, like something was happening at night. That's when I decided to set up the camera. I'm not proud of it. I'm not the kind of person who spies on people, who sets up hidden surveillance in his own home. It felt like a violation of privacy, of trust. But I kept thinking about my mother, about how scared she looked, about those bruises, and I knew I had to do something. I had to know the truth. I went to an electronics store in downtown Ottawa, told the young man working there that I wanted a small camera for home security. He showed me several options. I picked one that was tiny, could be hidden easily, had night vision, and could record for hours on a memory card. It cost me $200. I paid in cash. Didn't want it showing up on our joint credit card statement. I brought it home and waited for the right moment. On a Wednesday afternoon, Margaret was at work, Mom was napping. I went into Mom's room. My hands were shaking as I looked around for a good spot to hide the camera. It needed to have a clear view of Mom's bed, but it couldn't be obvious. I finally settled on the bookshelf across from her bed. I put the camera behind a framed photograph of Mom and Dad from their 40th wedding anniversary. Adjusted the angle. The lens was tiny, barely visible. Unless you knew it was there, you'd never spot it. I turned it on, set it to motion-activated recording, and left the room. Then I waited. That night at dinner, I could barely eat. Margaret chatted about her day at work, some problem with a client's books. Mom picked at her food. I watched them both, my stomach in knots. After dinner, we all watched TV for a while in the living room. At 9 o'clock, Mom said she was tired and wanted to go to bed. I helped her to her room, made sure she had everything she needed. "Good night, Mom," I said, kissing her forehead. "Sleep well." "Good night, honey," she said. She looked exhausted. I closed her door and went back downstairs. Margaret and I watched the news, then went to bed ourselves around 11. I lay there in the dark, Margaret beside me, waiting, listening. I don't know what I expected to hear. Footsteps, voices, but the house was silent. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because the next thing I knew, my alarm was going off. 6 in the morning. I got up carefully, not wanting to wake Margaret, went downstairs, made coffee. My hands shook as I poured it. I knew what I had to do. I had to check that camera, but I was terrified of what I might find. I waited until Margaret left for work at 8. Then I went up to Mom's room. She was still sleeping, breathing softly. I quietly retrieved the camera from behind the photograph and took it to my office. My heart was pounding as I plugged the memory card into my computer. The video player opened. The recording had started at 11:43 p.m. the previous night, triggered by motion in the room. I clicked play. At first, it was just Mom sleeping. The night vision gave everything a green tint. I could see her chest rising and falling peacefully under the blankets. For several minutes, nothing happened. I started to feel foolish. What did I think I was going to see? Then, at 12:17 a.m., according to the timestamp, the door opened. Margaret walked into the room. She was wearing her nightgown, moving quietly. She walked over to Mom's bed and stood there for a moment, looking down at her. I watched, confused. Was she just checking on Mom? Making sure she was okay? Then Margaret reached down and shook Mom's shoulder. Hard. Mom woke up, disoriented, confused. I couldn't hear what they were saying clearly. The camera didn't have great audio, but I could see Mom's face. Fear. Immediate, stark fear. She tried to sit up, but Margaret pushed her back down. And then Margaret started talking to her, leaning close to Mom's face, speaking directly at her. I couldn't make out all the words, but I caught fragments. Burden. Ruining my life. Should be in a home. Pathetic. Mom was crying, silent tears running down her face as Margaret berated her. It went on for 10 minutes. 10 minutes of my wife verbally abusing my mother, saying things I couldn't fully hear but could imagine. Mom just lay there crying, not fighting back, too confused and scared to defend herself. Then Margaret grabbed Mom's arm, the same arm where I'd seen the bruise. She gripped it hard, her fingers digging into the flesh, and yanked Mom halfway out of bed. "Listen to me," Margaret hissed, and this I heard clearly. "You don't say anything to Richard about this. Not one word. If you do, I'll make sure you end up in the worst nursing home I can find. Do you understand me?" Mom nodded, sobbing. Margaret shoved her back onto the bed and left the room. The whole thing had lasted maybe 15 minutes. On the video, I watched Mom curl up under her blankets, crying into her pillow, alone in the dark. I sat at my computer, staring at the screen, unable to move, unable to breathe. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be my wife. Margaret, who I'd spent 40 years with. Margaret, who'd been a good mother to our children. Margaret, who'd held my hand at David's funeral and promised we'd get through anything together. But it was real. I'd just watched it happen. I'd just watched my wife abuse my mother in the middle of the night when she thought no one was watching, and suddenly everything made sense. The bruises, the fear, Mom's deteriorating condition, the weight loss, the exhaustion. This wasn't the first time. This had been happening over and over, every night, for weeks, maybe months. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough that I heard Mom stirring, getting up. I closed the video player quickly, shoved the camera in my desk drawer, and went to check on her. She was in the bathroom, moving slowly, painfully. When she came out and saw me, she flinched. "It's okay, Mom," I said gently. "It's just me. Let me help you downstairs. I'll make breakfast." Over oatmeal, I watched her closely. She was pale, exhausted, barely touching her food. I wanted to tell her I knew. I wanted to hold her and promise her it would never happen again. But I couldn't. Not yet. Because I knew if I confronted Margaret without a solid plan, she'd deny everything, destroy any evidence, maybe even try to have Mom declared incompetent so her word wouldn't hold up. I needed more evidence. I needed to document everything. And I needed to figure out the right way to get Mom to safety and get Margaret out of our lives. I kept the camera running. Every night I'd retrieve the memory card in the morning and save the videos to an encrypted folder on my computer. And every night, the same thing happened. Margaret would wait until she thought I was asleep, then go to Mom's room. Sometimes she'd hit Mom, slap her face, pinch her arms. Sometimes she'd just stand there and verbally abuse her, calling her names, telling her she was worthless, that she'd ruined Margaret's life by coming to live with us. Sometimes she'd force pills down Mom's throat. Sleeping pills, I think, to keep her sedated during the day so she'd be less trouble. I documented it all. 5 nights of video evidence. And every morning I'd sit with Mom at breakfast, my heart breaking, pretending I didn't know, because I was building a case. I called a lawyer, a family law attorney named Sarah Chen that a former colleague recommended. I met with her privately, showed her the videos on my laptop in her office. She watched them, her face getting harder with each one. When they finished, she looked at me and said, "Mr. Morrison, this is elder abuse, criminal abuse. Your wife could face jail time for this. I need to get my mother away from her," I said, safely, legally. I can't just throw Margaret out. It's her house too, and I'm afraid if I confront her, she'll hurt Mom worse. Sarah nodded. "Here's what we're going to do. First, you need to get your mother to a doctor. Today, if possible. Document those bruises. Get them photographed. Get a medical report stating they're consistent with physical abuse. That, combined with these videos, gives us everything we need. Then we contact the police. They'll remove your wife from the home and charge her. You can file for a restraining order immediately. Your mother will be safe." "Today?" I said. The thought of confronting this today, of blowing up my entire life today, was terrifying. "The longer you wait, the more danger your mother is in," Sarah said gently. "I know this is hard, but you know what needs to be done." She was right. I knew she was right. I went home. Margaret was at work. I told Mom I was taking her to see a doctor, just a checkup. She didn't argue. I took her to our family physician, Dr. Peterson, who I'd called ahead of time and explained the situation to. He examined Mom thoroughly, documented every bruise, every mark. He took photographs. He asked Mom gentle questions about how she got the injuries. At first, she gave her usual vague answers, but then, when Dr. Peterson said quietly, "Dorothy, you're safe here. You can tell me the truth," she broke down. She told him everything. About Margaret coming to her room at night. About the hitting, the verbal abuse, the threats. About being forced to take pills that made her sleep all day. About being too scared to tell me because Margaret said she'd send her away. Dr. Peterson documented all of it. Then he looked at me. "Richard, I'm a mandatory reporter. I have to report this to the authorities. This is criminal abuse." "I know," I said. "I want you to. I want this stopped." He nodded and made the call right there from his office. Within an hour, 2 police officers arrived at the clinic. They took our statements. They watched the videos I'd saved on my laptop. They looked at the medical report. And then one of them, a female officer named Constable Williams, said, "Mr. Morrison, we're going to go to your house and arrest your wife. We'll need you and your mother to come with us to give formal statements at the station. Are you prepared for that?" I looked at Mom sitting in the clinic chair, looking small and frail and scared, but also, for the first time in weeks, hopeful. "Yes," I said. "We're ready." The police went to my house first. I'd given them my key. They let themselves in and found Margaret, who'd come home from work early. I don't know exactly what happened in that moment, but the officers told me later she denied everything at first. Said I was crazy, that Mom was senile and making things up. But when they showed her the videos, told her about the medical evidence, she went silent. They arrested her, charged her with assault, elder abuse, forcible confinement. They took her to the station, processed her, held her in custody. Meanwhile, Mom and I were at a different police station, giving our statements. It took hours. They were gentle with Mom, patient when she got confused or forgot details. They asked me about the timeline, about when I first suspected something, about setting up the camera. By the time we finished, it was evening. Constable Williams drove us home. The house felt different without Margaret there. Empty, cold, but also, for the first time in months, safe. I made Mom some soup for dinner. We ate in silence, both of us exhausted, processing what had just happened. "Thank you," Mom said quietly as I helped her to bed that night. Thank you for believing me, for saving me. I'm so sorry, Mom, I said, and I was crying now. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I let this happen to you. She took my hand. You didn't let anything happen, Richard. You stopped it. That's what matters. The legal process that followed was brutal. Margaret was released on bail with a no-contact order, meaning she couldn't come near Mom or me. She moved in with her sister in Barhaven. I filed for divorce immediately. She fought me on everything, tried to claim the videos were illegal, that I'd violated her privacy, but Sarah, my lawyer, shut that down fast. You can't claim privacy when you're committing crimes. The criminal trial happened 6 months later. The Crown prosecutor was fantastic, a woman named Jennifer Kowalski, who treated Mom with such respect and dignity throughout the whole ordeal. She presented the videos in court, the medical evidence, Mom's testimony, which she gave bravely despite her confusion and fear, my testimony about what I'd observed. Margaret's defense lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, claimed I'd manipulated Mom against Margaret, that the videos were taken out of context. But how do you take elder abuse out of context? The jury saw through it. They deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced Margaret to 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years probation. She'd never be allowed to work with vulnerable populations again. She'd have a criminal record for the rest of her life. Our divorce was finalized while she was serving her sentence. I got the house. She got nothing. I didn't care about the money or the property. I just wanted her gone. Mom lived with me for another year after the trial. Emily flew in from Vancouver and actually apologized to Mom for whatever had driven them apart years ago. They reconciled. It was beautiful to see. Mom's physical injuries healed relatively quickly, but the emotional trauma took longer. She had nightmares. She'd wake up scared, thinking Margaret was in the house. We got her into therapy, specialized care for elder abuse victims. Slowly, gradually, she started to heal. She started smiling again, laughing at her game shows, telling her stories. But the dementia continued to progress. That was something we couldn't stop. By the following November, a year after Margaret's arrest, Mom needed more care than I could provide at home. We found a wonderful assisted living facility here in Ottawa, a place that specializes in dementia care. Emily helped me move Mom in. The staff there are kind, attentive, vigilant. I visit her every single day. Some days she knows who I am, some days she doesn't. But she's safe. She's cared for. She's never afraid. I'm 70 now, retired from teaching, divorced, living alone in a house that feels too big. Emily visits more often now, every few months instead of twice a year. We've gotten closer through all this. She tells me she's proud of me for protecting Grandma, for doing the right thing even when it was hard. Margaret got out of prison last year. I don't know where she is now, don't care. She's not allowed to contact me or Mom. Sometimes I think about the 40 years we spent together, wonder if there were signs I missed earlier, wonder if she'd always been capable of this cruelty and I'd just never seen it, or if something in her broke when David died, some darkness that took over and turned her into someone I didn't recognize. I'll never know, and it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I trusted my instincts. I saw the signs, even when I didn't want to believe what they meant. I took action, even when it meant destroying my marriage, my life as I knew it. I protected my mother when she couldn't protect herself. I'm sharing this story because I want people to understand something crucial. Elder abuse is real. It happens in homes just like mine, in families that look normal from the outside. It happens to people who can't always speak up for themselves, who are vulnerable, confused, dependent on others for care. And it's often perpetrated by people we trust, people we love, people we'd never suspect. If you notice an elderly person in your life showing signs like my mother did, unexplained bruises, fear of certain people, withdrawal, drastic changes in behavior or health, please don't ignore it. Ask questions. Investigate. Trust your gut. Don't let politeness or fear of confrontation stop you from protecting someone who needs help. Document everything. Photos, videos, medical reports. Build evidence. Talk to lawyers, doctors, police. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it might destroy relationships. Yes, people will deny and deflect and try to make you feel crazy. But a vulnerable person's safety is worth more than keeping the peace. It's worth more than maintaining appearances. It's worth everything. My mother is safe now. That's all that matters. I sleep at night knowing I did the right thing, even though it cost me my marriage and the life I thought I'd have in my retirement. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because family isn't just about blood or marriage certificates. It's about protecting the people who can't protect themselves. It's about standing up against cruelty, even when it's wearing a familiar face. It's about being brave enough to shine a light into the darkness and expose what's hiding there. If you're in a situation like mine where you suspect someone you care about is being abused, please act. Don't wait. Don't hope it will get better. It won't get better on its own. Get help. Contact Adult Protective Services, the police, elder abuse hotlines. In Canada, we have resources. Every province has reporting mechanisms for elder abuse. Use them. And if you're watching this because you see yourself in my story, because you're the one being hurt, please know this. You deserve safety. You deserve respect. You deserve care. What's happening to you is not your fault. You are not a burden. You are a human being with dignity and worth, and there are people who will help you if you can find the courage to tell someone. To anyone who made it through this whole story, thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Share this if you think it might help someone. Talk about elder abuse. Don't let it stay hidden in the darkness where it thrives. Be vigilant. Be brave. Be the person who speaks up. Because silence protects abusers. Truth protects victims. And in the end, truth is all that matters.